The Shawshank Redemption is frequently considered one of the best films of all time. It currently sits above The Godfather at the #1 spot on the IMDb's user-voted top 250 films list, and it's regularly featured on critics' lists of the greatest movies ever made. The 1994 story of Andy Dufresne's incarceration, redemption, and ultimate escape from Shawshank Prison, based on Stephen King's novella, was famously a flop when it first hit cinemas, but after it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, became an unexpected VHS rental hit. So what can the film tell us about philosophy? If philosophy is the pursuit of the question of what there is that unites human experience, and how we know what there is that unites human experience, then there must be something in the Shawshank Redemption that gets to the root of our shared understanding of the world, that contains some essential answer to the question of what it is to be human. The Shawshank Redemption is the story of banker Andy Dufresne, who is wrongly convicted for murdering his wife and her lover after finding them in bed together. The story follows Dufresne's 19 years in Shawshank Prison, focusing on his friendship with Morgan Freeman's Red. Andy makes a name for himself by providing financial advice to the guards and the warden, in return for favours for his friends and fellow inmates, beers, the good jobs, and most notably, the building of a library. He also embezzles funds for the warden, while hiding the paper trail. He eventually escapes Shawshank through a hole he's been digging with a rock hammer, blows the whistle on the warden, takes the money he's created fake identities for, and makes for Mexico, where he meets his friend Red after he's eventually released. But where do we start if we're to analyse the philosophic importance of the film's themes? The most obvious is that on the surface, it's a prison film. Sociologist Sean O'Sullivan has noted that most Western countries saw a significant growth in incarceration rates throughout the 1990s, which subsequently had an effect on Hollywood and the popularity of prison films like Con Air and American History X. Some critics argued that television turned prisons into entertainment objects that had a negative impact on the public's willingness to address the underlying problems. They argued that prison entertainment trivialized the issue. And there are many interpretations that we could make about the Shawshank Redemption here. But it's often said that Shawshank isn't really a prison film. Like many films, it's a story that conforms to what Joseph Campbell has termed the monomyth, the hero's journey, in which a hero, through uncertainty, overcomes a challenge and finally prevails a changed man. Shawshank has many archetypes and themes that conform to the monomyth. Tyranny and injustice, redemption and revolution, and characters like the wise old man and the main villain's henchman. And the film has most frequently been interpreted as being a retelling of the most enduring monomyth of all time, Christianity, with Andy as a Christ-like figure, innocent but condemned, who brings salvation to his fellow inmates and who, we presume, dies in his cell, but resurrects himself while bringing justice to the corrupt. Andy shares everything he earns with his fellow inmates, often without taking for himself beers, cake, books, education. He helped a dozen guys get their high school diplomas, as Red says. I think this is a fair interpretation, but within it there is a more fundamental and simpler analysis, a more philosophic analysis that gets to the root of what makes the monomyth itself so fundamental to human experience. Director Frank Darabont has said he wanted viewers to find their own meaning in the film. That people can attach a range of meanings to Shawshank speaks to its universal appeal, and also to the underlying psychological appeal of Christianity. There's something inherently useful that lies within the narrative of the hero's journey. And the prison can be a metaphor for any type of prison, literal, psychological, or social. A bad relationship, an insufferable job, an abusive partner, illness, depression. The idea of a prison can even apply to a mundane daily challenge like a shift at work. The fundamental point here is that there is a better place that itself improves through the endurance required to get there. To look at this philosophically, we have to ask the question of what there is that unites all human experience. As I discussed in a previous video on Heidegger, the question of being human, must start with the question of what phenomena make up human experience. And from the popularity of the film, it seems reasonable to claim that one of these phenomena is hope. It's obvious that the film is about hope, as Stephen King has said. The subtitle of the novella was even Hope Springs Eternal, and Red's final words before the credits roll are, I hope. Hope itself is a universal human emotion, but we need to ask why. Where in our psychology does it exist? What purpose does it serve when it fires the neurons that actualize it as a phenomenon? The core of the film is illustrated by what might be the most important scene, taking place about halfway through the story. After spending time in the hole, solitary confinement, Andy talks to Red about his hope that one day he'll be free. Red responds like this.
Hope. Hope. Let me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. It's got no use on the inside. You better get used to that idea.
He calls Andy's hope a shitty pipe dream. But Andy is adamant that it's necessary, and the conclusion of the film confirms this by both convincing Red and rewarding both characters with redemption. But what is it about hope that makes it so important and such a universal emotion? What is it scientifically, psychologically, or philosophically? The great 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant stated that after what can I know and what should I do, for what may I hope is one of the most fundamental questions of philosophy. The idea of hope also goes a long way to explaining the appeal of faith. Faith in an afterlife, faith in a religion. Kant says that hoping for one's own happiness, one's own moral progress, and the improvement of the human race as a whole are the three primary objects of hope. If we combine this with Heidegger's observation that projections into the future are a fundamental way we experience the world, then it becomes clear that the concept of hope, while difficult to define scientifically or empirically, is one that's integral, maybe even superlative, to human essence. Studies have shown that hope is an important part of recovery from illness. Statistically, patients who exhibit hopeful behaviours are more likely to perform better in different components of recovery, from eating healthier to preventing illness in the first place. Rosemarie Rizzo Parse, the nursing theorist who developed the human becoming theory of nursing, a theory that was influenced by Heidegger, has shown in studies that hope and no hope are universal phenomena. This dyad, hope and no hope, exists as a precipice that's crossed back and forth between in the day-to-day. It's something we're constantly traversing. Psychologist Lola Lopes opens an article on the psychology of risk by declaring that countless hours have been spent by psychologists and economists alike in trying to explain theoretically why people buy both lottery tickets and insurance. That is, that they hope for things and fear for things at the same time. Both insurance and lottery tickets are gambling. Both hope and fear at their simplest are risk assessments. Lopes defines risk as referring to situations in which a decision is made whose consequences depend on the outcomes of future events having known probabilities. And we actually live our lives depending on the probabilities of future events. The weather tomorrow, the chance of a promotion, the likelihood of food at a restaurant being good. In fact, everything has a probability. Lopes notes that some probabilities are very good, that the sun will rise tomorrow morning, whereas some are bad, the chance of winning a lottery ticket. Either way, we organise our lives accordingly. You could even say that this is the fundamental structure of our brains, the code that runs in the background of everything. We can imagine our projections and plans about the future stretching out between different poles of likelihoods in our psychological makeup, a risk analysis that exists between the two poles of hope and fear. We hope we might win the lottery, we fear our house burning down, and we buy tickets and insurance accordingly. Even making a comment to a friend is based on a subtle and usually sub or unconscious calculation about the probability of receiving a suitable response, be it advice or a laugh. On top of this, people have different reactions to probabilities. Some are more risk averse than others. Some ride motorbikes, some make controversial comments. We weigh up the odds, we consider, again, usually subconsciously, the risks and the benefits. But there's another element. We also have to believe that we have some control over the world around us, that we can affect the world, either in a simple way, by taking food, for example, or in a complex way, by building a library. Controlling and adjusting the world doesn't happen without an element of calculating probability. Psychologists have found that losing the belief that we have any control of our lives or environments can be a major cause of depression, which affects motivation. In Shawshank, Andy is always taking more risks, while retaining the idea that he has control over a world that he shouldn't really have any control over. He risks being thrown off the roof when offering financial services to Captain Hadley. He risks the hole when playing music to the yard through the PA. But the ultimate risk is tunnelling through the wall, an action that we are completely unaware of until the final scenes. These risks are always coupled with a hope that Andy still has some control over his destiny. Compare this to Red's attitude. He still risks, he knows how to get things, but he works within the walls of the prison, and so the rules of prison life, even if he bends them slightly. For Red, hoping for anything is a complete waste of time. Red's attitude to hope is that of the skeptic or the Stoic. The Stoics, philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome, believed that ethics, logic, and physics formed a logos, a complete interconnected world, a oneness that included nature, humanity, and God. For the Stoics, God didn't exist outside of time and space, like the Christian interpretation of God, but was time and space and everything in it. God then was nature and physics, and so as humans we should live according to nature and its laws. This is a very different attitude to how we think about the world today, where we seek to dominate and control nature for resources, innovation, and progress. This idea led the Stoics to believe in acceptance of living harmoniously with the Logos. In other words, they thought we have little control of the world and the laws of nature, that in fact they controlled us. This view has a lot in common with the prison environment, where rigid concrete rules must be accepted and endured stoically. Red then is the stoic of the story. In this important scene, about 2/3 of the way through the film, Red says,
I don't think you ought to be doing this to yourself, Andy. This is just shitty pipe dreams. I mean, Mexico is way the hell down there, and you're in here, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, right. That's the way it is. It's down there and I'm in here. I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
that's the way it is one of the central messages of Stoicism. We can see two outlooks then, one of the Stoic and one of the Hoper. So why does Andy's vision win? Why does Red become convinced that Andy's belief in hope is a good one worth having? Because one argument goes like this. If I hope for something and it doesn't arise, hoping for it was a waste of time. Whereas if I don't hope for something and it does arise, I am better off for it. I gain more, which would suggest that Red was the more sensible of the two. In Stephen King's novella, Red says, the whole idea seemed absurd, that the mental image of blue water and white beaches seemed more cruel than foolish. It dragged at my brain like a fishhook. As Luke Bovens points out, though, in an article on the value of hope, this attitude ignores the instrumental value of hope. Hope isn't just an idle fantasy, but engages the brain in a way that directs us towards a goal. It keeps us focused. But what if there's no chance that we have any agency in bringing about the thing that we're hoping for? For example, hoping the weather will be nice at the weekend for a camping trip. Bovens argues that not only does hope engage our brains into action, but even if action is not possible, hope engenders new constitutive hopes. Hopes lead to new hopes. In other words, in hoping for something, we imagine other things that we can do if the thing we hope for arises. I can imagine I might like to go to the beach if the weather's nice while camping. Hope can illuminate new possibilities in the world, or may even lead us to the realization that they aren't worth hoping for, so that we rearrange our hopes, our projections, our ideas. In fact, this might be the very basis of creativity, which makes it a fundamental part of consciousness. We can only be creative if we hope for a certain outcome. I can only imagine what effects I might use in this video if I hope I can write a good enough script. Andy can only imagine the hotel he wants to build if he hopes he might escape. Hope, then, is what philosophers call instrumental. It's an instrument used for other means. Bovens notes, for example, that the power of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech lies in its message of hope as mental imaging. In this context, it's clear that hope has the power to mobilize millions in the pursuit of the goal of winning black rights. It's interesting then, if we go back to Red's line in the novella, that he says the whole idea seemed absurd, and that mental image of blue water and white beaches seemed more cruel than foolish. And the idea that hope is universal, transcendental, is skillfully interwoven with what I think is one more critical key to the film's success, the music, both of composer Thomas Newman and in another one of the film's core scenes, Mozart. Philosopher Roger Scruton has argued that the space music exists in neither wholly physical nor wholly abstract, is a metaphoric space where a new kind of individual is born and lives out its life. It lives outside of space and time. It is transcendent. It's not surprising then that music plays a key part in conveying hope in Shawshank. When Andy plays Mozart's Marriage of Figaro over the PA to the yard, he is punished with 2 weeks in the hole. Easy time, he says, because he had the memory of Mr. Mozart for company. When the music is played out across the yard, Red says,
Andy?
I have no idea to this day what those 2 Italian ladies were singing about. Truth is, I don't want to know. Some things are best left unsaid. I like to think they were singing about something so beautiful it can't be expressed in words, and makes your heart ache because of it. I tell you, those voices soared, higher and farther than anybody in a great place dares to dream. It was like some beautiful bird flapped into our drab little cage and made those walls dissolve away. And for the briefest of moments, every last man at Shawshank felt free.
Slavoj Žižek calls the music in Shawshank the brief apparition of a future utopian otherness and compares it to the Holy Ghost. That is, it conveys a universal transcendent future. It is somehow connected to that contemplative, creative, and projective part of our brains. Having the right balance of hopes and fears is fundamental to a healthy life. Red thinks that Andy hopes too much, blurring the line between wishful thinking and reality. And this, of course, is a danger. But as Andy says in the letter he leaves Red,
Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies.
the final message of the film is that Red is no longer a skeptic and comes to believe in the power of hope. Understanding the concept of hope is a perfect example of the utility and importance of philosophy and the possibilities of interdisciplinary dialogue between philosophy, psychology, sociology, neuroscience, and in this case, film studies. The underlying lesson of the Shawshank Redemption is, as Andy says, that hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. And I think the film's success lies in Andy being right. Hope is not only powerful and necessary, but is responsible for a range of other good things, from wellness to goal orientation to creativity. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you'll watch the film again. Actually, Morgan obviously does it better.
I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope.
If you want to support Then and Now, then please subscribe below, and most importantly, click the bell here to receive notifications when I upload a new video. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram in the links in the description below. And if you're feeling really generous, then this channel only exists through the support of pledges on Patreon, where you can support new content with as little as $1 for each new video. Thanks for watching. See you next week.